Welcome everyone. My name is Chris Zimmerman and I am an Enterprise Customer Success Manager here at Jamf. My role is to help organizations in finding solutions for their Jamf environment. I've been at Jamf for a little longer than a year and I'm looking forward to talking to you about how to elevate your end user experience. Which brings us to our subject today, BYOD, Empowering Employees' Personal Device. The goal of today's presentation is to take a high-level overview on BYOD management. The majority of this topic will be discussing iOS and Jamf Pro enrollments. However, BYOD is also possible in Jamf Now, Jamf School, and also for macOS. The three questions I plan on answering in this presentation are: 1, what is BYOD? 2, where do we start? 3, how can we make our deployments even better? By the end of this presentation, you should have a better understanding of the why, what, and how of BYOD management. So let's start. What is BYOD? BYOD stands for Bring Your Own Device. It's as simple as that. Let employees bring their personal devices into management. It's a lower cost management solution, not only by reducing your costs on technology purchases, but also with licensing in Jamf Pro. Employees have fewer devices to be accountable for and are able to access the things they need in a fast-paced workplace. It's also a way to comfortably manage corporate data on an end user's device. This is what matters most, being able to securely share sensitive corporate information to the end user. So where do we start? We have to make a plan. When considering your planning efforts for a BYOD deployment, it should be noted that iOS devices will not be in a supervised state. The difference between what can be done with an unsupervised device versus supervised will be in the documentation for this presentation. But to get started, we have a few prerequisites for your consideration when deploying a BYOD management workflow. These are LDAP, managed Apple IDs, and of course you can't have mobile device management without devices to enroll. These are going to help make the workflow more streamlined for the end user experience, while also helping to make sure the right people are given the right resources. So let's start by talking about LDAP. Configuring LDAP in Jamf allows users to authenticate with their existing credentials to authenticate for Jamf in enrollment. There's no need to create a bunch of different accounts. You can create an LDAP group to have your users automatically get the permissions they need for enrollment. The setup for this will be included in the documentation. Jamf will need a user account to access the LDAP server. This account will need to be an admin with read-only access minimum. It is important to know that multi-factor authentication will need to be disabled for this account, as Jamf makes calls to the LDAP server throughout the day. The next piece of the puzzle is going to be managed Apple IDs. Simply put, managed Apple IDs, or MAIDs, are corporate-owned Apple IDs. These are separate from personal Apple IDs. However, instead of the user managing their Apple ID, all of the management is taken care of by your admin team. But why are they important? This is important because it gives IT an additional layer of security between you and your company's information. The IT team has the ability to restrict access, remove accounts, and update account information. Keep in mind that a MAID will have fewer permissions than a personal Apple ID. Things such as Apple Pay, getting your own applications from the App Store, those are restricted to personal Apple IDs only. For a comprehensive list of these permissions, please check out the documentation from Apple. So we've talked about the what and the why of managed Apple IDs, but how do we create managed Apple IDs? MAIDs are created in either Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. You can use a domain that is created by Apple, or you can even leverage an existing domain that your organization owns. I'll give you a hint. You needed a domain in order to create an Apple Business Manager account. It is required that the domain is owned by the organization. This is verified by Apple by using a TXT file that's hosting your domain. More instructions on that in the documentation. If there are conflicts, meaning let's say that me, Chris, at yourorganization.com created a personal Apple ID with that email. Since the company has decided we own that domain, I personally cannot own that email as a personal Apple ID. The end user will get notified IT will get notified of which end users are also in conflict, and you'll get a resolution for that. The documentation on this is also on Apple's webpage, but will be included for this presentation as well. Finally, we want to talk about how do we create these? So we've talked about like, hey, we can do it in Apple Business Manager, we can do it in Apple School Manager, but where do we go further to create this? Once a domain is registered, you can create Apple IDs manually, but that sounds like a lot of work. So what we want to leverage is something that we call federation. Simply put, federation is a way for a user to authenticate using an existing directory service. Currently, Apple offers support for 2 directory services. These are Microsoft Azure AD and Google Workspace. Once you've registered a domain, you can turn federation right in Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. You will get all of that setup completed in your browser. As an added bonus, you can also have designated roles configured through directory sync. Apple School Manager allows user creation from your sys integration, and you also have the ability to upload through SFTP. These are 2 systems that are exclusive to Apple School Manager only. So we've talked about LDAP. We've talked about managed Apple IDs. So the next part is we need to go ahead and make a plan. So what does a perfect deployment of bring your own device look like? Keep in mind that when you're deploying out the features to these devices, it's not going to be the same set of privileges you get with an institutionally owned device. You want to start with the big picture. What does the perfect deployment look like? A perfect deployment is going to be one where the end user is able to go through the entire enrollment process and have access to all the necessary resources they need to do their work without much involvement with your IT team. Imagine I'm a new employee. I can go ahead and take in my personal phone. I can log into your company portal. I can download the resources that I need, and I'm ready to go day one. I don't have to have continuous conversations with being able to access things like my email, get things set up for me, because all that's been taken care of by my wonderful IT team. We want to be able to communicate easy instructions to the end user and allow them to drive the enrollment experience. To do this, we have to start with this basics and build out what we eventually want to deploy. Let's start small. What are the basics of our deployment strategy? What do we need to give end users the minimum amount of solutions for a feasible solution? Keep this in mind as well. How do we sell this to our end users to have them buy into this experience? What benefits are we offering the end user to allow management of their personal device? Who all do we need to get involved with this decision-making process for this project? Do we need to talk about legal? Do we need to talk to the executives? Do we need to get HR involved? These are all different ways that we can go ahead and do this. Another thing you can leverage as well, if you have a technology enablement fund for users to use their personal device, this can be one of those caveats that says, hey, for this technology enablement, we will need you to go ahead and get your device enrolled into our management solution. Next part of this is going to be testing. How does this experience look like for the end user? And how do we communicate what the experience is supposed to be for the end user as well? After we've done our testing, we've verified everything works just the way we want to then go ahead and deploy. We start out with phase 1 of our BYOD program. Everything looks great. We're getting people enrolled. Everything looks successful. So let's go ahead and add on to it. What does our phase 2, our phase 3, et cetera, look like? And how do we take efforts to the next step? So this is kind of a recommended solution with anything you do into Jamf. Start small, test, deploy, add, repeat. And if you do this, you'll find yourself being successful more often than not. Now, we've talked about the what is BYOD. And in there, we talked about some of the prerequisites. We talked about kind of getting things set up for ourselves, and we talked about building a plan. So how do we deploy BYOD? Here, we're going to highlight the 2 different kinds of enrollment methods. These are going to be very high-level approaches. So for more in-depth information, please see the documentation where we kind of go into more technical knowledge for this. And And we also want to stress this is going to create some buy-in for your end users. So how do you sell them as a great idea? Well, let's go ahead and talk about user-initiated enrollment. User-initiated enrollment is a simple thing to set up. In fact, you more than likely already have this set up in your environment. All it requires is a user to get to a landing page. Most of the time, this is just your jamfinstance.com/enroll. If you have SSO set up in your Jamf environment, it'll take your user to a screen that they're already familiar with. The end user will then go through some prompts and then get a profile. With this method, you can also set up what are called enrollment invitations. So you can send an enrollment link via email. For iPhones, you can send SMS. User will then go through the same prompts that they would if they just were going to the link as well. When doing enrollment invitations, you can also set an expiration as well as site access for that before sending out that link. Let's go ahead and take a look at what user-initiated enrollment looks like in a video demo here. So I'm an end user. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my web browser of choice. Here, I'm presented with a login screen I'm familiar with because my organization has set up SSO for user-initiated enrollment. I'm going to type in my email, something I'm already familiar with. After that, I'm going to type in my credentials, something else I'm already familiar with. Then I'm going to be presented with a screen that'll say, enter your managed Apple ID. This might be confusing to your end user if they don't know what a managed Apple ID is. So of course, this text is configurable. You can say something along the lines of, please enter your work email. But this is going to be attached to the profile that the user will then install. So the user will press allow, they'll press close. After the profile has been downloaded, the user will then navigate to settings to begin the installation of this. So you can see here, they have the enroll in AcmeSoft. They'll get some information here, user enrollment. You'll click on enroll my iPad. The next part that they're authenticating here is the managed Apple ID. Here we have federation set up, so it's going to go ahead and push us over to our SSO. User is going to just type in their password because we already have the email set up here. After that, this is where the profile gets installed. The profile will then go ahead and show up on the user's computer as well as the managed Apple ID. So we can now see the end result here is I have a personal Apple ID running on my device as well as a managed Apple ID. And I can have that confidence as an end user knowing that those two are separate. That's user-initiated enrollment. The other piece of this is what is called account-driven user enrollment. This was introduced in iOS 15. This allows users to log in directly on their personal device without having to navigate to a link. They can use their credentials that they're already familiar with. They'll be presented with a login screen as well, as long as we have that configured. User just logs in with their maid and does all that. It should be noted that this does require some extra steps to set up. You will need to do things such as hosting a JSON file on the same domain as your managed Apple ID. This will also require federation to be set up, and you may need to partner with your network team. The more technical information on this will be in the documentation, but for now, let's go ahead and see what this looks like for the end user. As an end user, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to the settings. So once I click on settings here, I am then going to click on VPN and device management after I've clicked on general. Easy enough, I click on sign into work or school account. After this, I'm going to type in my email address. When I type in my email address, the next piece of this is me authenticating into Jamf Pro. So what happens here is a process that's called service discovery. Fancy way of just saying, hey, we found your Jamf Pro server, go ahead and log in. I'm now authenticating with my credentials here. So I will type this in, and after that, I'm going to type in my password to authenticate this. So this is just to begin the enrollment process. After that, there's going to be the, you guessed it, the managed Apple ID process. So it's going to leverage the same email, and then it's going to prompt me to use iCloud for work. Once I go ahead and click into here, it's then going to utilize federation to then bump me to this login screen right here. I'm going to type in my password one more time. Currently, there's no way to pass that token. So for now, it's just going to require that double authentication, one for the profile, one for the managed Apple ID. Next thing we're going to do is allow remote management, and we're going to get to that same end result where we're going to go ahead and see the managed Apple ID is now set up. I have a clear delineation between my personal Apple ID and my work Apple ID, and it's all right here. And we can also see that the profile has been installed as well. So you can see this process is really fascinating, and it happens all on the device. Doesn't necessarily need to require us to open up the settings app, but it happens directly in the settings app. And when I say settings app, I meant Safari. So it doesn't require us to open a web browser. We can just go directly into our settings. So we've now talked about what is BYOD. We talked about how to deploy BYOD. Now we want to talk about how do we make this BYOD experience even better. I want to talk about a solution you're probably already familiar with, and a couple more that are going to help make the end user experience even more secure. The first thing that we can talk about by making BYOD even better is self-service. Self-service is a do-it-yourself catalog for end users to install the applications they need. You can configure the different settings for the applications in your Jamf Pro server and then push that out to make it available for the user to download in self-service. You can also have self-service install automatically when they enroll their device. You can install a web clip, and you can also have users install self-service themselves. This allows you the ability to push out things such as per app VPN or even Jamf Unlock. So if you are utilizing Macs in your environment and you want your end users to be able to unlock their Mac with their iPhone, that's something you can push out as well. So custom configuration in applications is something you can do for that. It also allows the ability to keep these applications up to date for the end user. So you can set up the application behavior to update automatically, so you don't have to rely on the end user going to the App Store to update. This also helps set up simple solutions for the end user. So for instance, maybe you have a common website that you have your end users go to. Maybe you want to have them, call a support line. You want them to email. You can set up tickets, things of that nature. You can create those processes within self-service, leveraging web clips and things of that nature. So now that we've kind of talked about one way to make the end user experience a more do-it-yourself, we want to go ahead and kind of change gears and focus more on the security side of BYOD. Did you know that organizations can be paying around $800,000 over a 3-year period for a traditional VPN solution? According to IBM, the total cost of a data breach for an organization has gone up from $3.86 million to $4.24 million from 2020 to 2021. That is an increase of 10% of the average total cost of a breach. In the same IBM report, it can take up to 287 days on average to identify and contain a data breach. The likelihood of a mobile-related data breach can be as high as 1 in 3 employees. So how do we mitigate these risks and empower our employees' devices to make sure these breaches don't impact our organizations? I want to introduce you to JamTrust. This is a new application that is available for macOS, iOS, Windows, and Android. That's right, you heard it correctly. We also support Windows and Android devices for JamTrust. In JamTrust, you're going to find 3 different applications: Jamf Data Policy, Jamf Private Access, and Jamf Threat Defense. Today, we're going to be focusing on 2 of these offerings, Private Access and Threat Defense, but marketing materials available for all 3 in the documentation. If you're interested in deploying JamTrust, you should talk to your sales rep about licensing information. Let's go ahead and start with, what is Jamf Private Access? It is a modern zero trust network accessing solution. It is entirely cloud-based architecture, so there's no need for any equipment to be managed on your end. It securely allows users to access company resources via any cloud or on-prem application. This includes resources such as email, internal documents, and messaging services. This works in partnership with your identity provider to make sure that only authenticated users can access specific resources. This also follows along with Apple's guidelines of not pushing out a system-wide VPN, but instead leveraging a software-defined protocol that works per application. It will only leverage the private access on applications you specify. The access will change if the device is determined to be at risk. For instance, If a device is not on the latest security update, then they won't be able to access the applications they need. It gives your organization an extra layer of accountability for the end user leveraging their device to access the company information. The other piece of this puzzle is going to be Jamf Threat Defense. Jamf Threat Defense is one of the few options that are designed for iOS specifically. This gives user privacy, the ability to safeguard online privacy with encryption and protection against personal data phishing. As an admin, you get real-time insight into risks and the ability to configure automated policies to mitigate these risks as they come up. This leverages machine learning as well as AI, leveraging a threat intelligence engine to block zero-day threats, such as phishing and malicious domains. So thank you so much for coming. I want to go ahead and summarize what all we've talked about. We talked about what is BYOD. We talked about where do we start, and we talked about how to make our deployment even better. BYOD is a way to bring an employee's personal device into management without compromising their personal data. It's a cost-saving solution and a way to unburden the amount of technology a user must carry. A way for companies to protect their corporate information and verify the proper devices are getting the proper access. We talked about where do we start. Get our prerequisites completed, configure LDAP, create those managed Apple IDs, and of course, have a plan. We wanted to start small and work our way up, build out those user-initiated workflows, and then start building out some more user-driven workflows. And we talked about how do we make our deployment even better. Solutions like Jamf Private Access and Threat Defense can secure your company data as well as your employee's personal device. You can also leverage tools that already exist, such as managed applications, to ensure an amazing end-user experience without sacrificing security. So, what's next? Well, start testing now. You should go ahead and leverage this. You more than likely have user-initiated enrollment enabled. If you don't, you can go ahead and start setting things up like your LDAP server, creating your managed Apple IDs, potentially setting up federation if your organization is able to do that. But feel free to check out the documentation that's put together. It's going to reference information that goes a little bit deeper than this presentation, including talking about the requirements to set up account-driven user enrollment. Finally, I got to put in a shameless plug here. If you're interested in seeing if this is a good fit for your organization, reach out to your customer success manager at success@jamf.com. You can also reach out to your sales team and your sales representative to discuss pricing as well as looking at demos for these different solutions. Finally, I want to thank you all for listening. It's been great, and I hope you're enjoying your time here at JNUC. My name is Chris, and I hope today that you've learned how to empower your employee's personal device.